I'm Choong-Min Jung from Hanmaum Church in Chuncheon. I lived like the main character from the film A Beautiful Mind. Due to my delusions about a person who doesn't even exist, I was once lost in darkness. But I want to share with you how I'm living in the light and truth after Jesus set me free. My mom dreamed about a dragon while carrying me. Supposedly, the Korean scholar Yulgo Lee was also born after such a dream. So my parents believed I was special. I thought I would become a great person too. So I tried to only be friends with smart kids, but due to such an arrogant attitude, I had no close friends and felt lonely. I spent a lot of time alone because I had brothers and no sisters. While I was alone, I comforted myself by daydreaming about a love story between a prince and princess. I had a very devoted mother who would do anything for her children. But she didn't know just how delicate and sensitive I was, and didn't quite understand me. While I was in elementary school, a very strict piano teacher gave me a lot of stress, but I never got to tell my mom that I didn't want piano lessons. As you can see, my mom and I didn't communicate well, and I became a person who didn't communicate well at home or at school. When I was in 9th grade, I moved to Seoul. Everything was new and I felt out of place. I didn't feel comfortable anywhere. As a result, my health got worse. My body felt heavy and sluggish. It didn't feel like my own, and I couldn't do anything. At night, I had insomnia, so I was always exhausted. During headaches, my head felt like it would crack, and my body was on fire. Due to this agony, I couldn't sleep until dawn. I constantly felt like there was a fireball in my chest, and I couldn't bear the stifling feeling. Just sitting in class was torturous. I couldn't hear a thing the teacher was saying. My face turned feverish and red, and I just wanted to run out of class. I avoided attention, pronounced words oddly, and couldn't say what I wanted to. So I fell asleep during class often. I wanted to quit school, but I couldn't. In high school, I forced myself to study in order to meet my parents' expectations. I always washed my hair before leaving home to study. You see, my head felt so heavy that I couldn't study without washing my hair. As I continued to do this, before I realized it, I began to have severe hair loss. Then, as the stressfulness went on, I lost so much hair that you could see my scalp. I felt so awful. I finished high school after much difficulty, and thankfully I went to college. But at some point, I fell into a delusion and could not separate fact from fiction. I thought that somebody loved me so much that he was stalking me. The idea that someone was watching my every move made me petrified and unable to breathe. And I blamed this stranger for my poor health, being unable to study, and having a hard time at school. But on the other hand, I foolishly grew happy at the thought that I was loved enough to be stalked. I was weary and lonely, so I comforted myself with the man in my delusion. All kinds of thoughts and feelings crossed my mind. I imagined that this man was innocent and shy, and that he was unable to approach me and just kept watching from a distance. So I wanted to find him and approach him first. I often went outside pretending to buy something because I thought this man was lingering near my home. I thought that the man in my delusion had put security cameras around the house to know more about me. Sometimes I was distressed because I heard voices of the man talking about me to someone else. I thought that there were security cameras in the bathroom, so I used it without turning the light on. And I purposely stumbled around like a drunken person, got irritated, and lashed out. My brother got worried and asked me, "Why are you like that? What's wrong?" But I couldn't tell him. I couldn't tell anyone. I thought it would just sound crazy. I thought no one would believe me. So I told my family that I felt tired and sick, but nobody around me, including my family, knew the truth. Inside, I felt like dying, but I pretended like nothing was wrong. Whenever I went to a new place or I met a new person, I assumed that someone who was somehow related to the man was around. I felt extremely self-conscious when there were many people, and that feeling was a terrible weight upon me. Whenever I rode the bus or the subway, or when I met people for a meal or tea, I watched those around me warily. I was almost going insane. I was so frustrated that I stuck a note that said, "Please call me," with my number on it on a wall outside. I thought that my stalker would call me, but he didn't. When there was a car following me, I wrote down its license plate number, just in case it was his, but there are so many cars to keep track of. But I told myself that he had lots of friends and that those cars belonged to them and wrote them all down. I wanted to stop the cars and talk to the drivers. I even prepared a short speech, but I couldn't bring myself to actually do it. I thought out everything about his life in detail. I lived near a renowned college, so I thought he attended that college and was perfect in every aspect. Once I covered my entire window with a black plastic bag because I couldn't stand the thought of him watching me through it. I didn't tell anyone about these delusions, but my parents noticed my strange behavior and took me to see a psychiatrist. Usually I received drug treatment. I still had insomnia at night, but due to the drugs, I would sleep all morning. That gave me enough rest, but the treatment was expensive, and after a year nothing had changed, so I stopped taking the drugs. The confidence I had as a child had all but vanished. This torment had begun in 9th grade, and it plagued me for more than 10 years after that. During those years, my soul was deadened to the point that I felt like I wasn't alive, as if I had lost time. I desperately wanted to live a normal life, even for just a moment. That was how I felt at the time. Often I cried while sitting in a dark room. Other times, I couldn't control my emotions and burst into tears, even in a crowded subway. When I couldn't contain my emotions at all, I would kick my door and break it. Or I would throw my backpack down on the sidewalk. My family moved to Incheon for me, though we didn't know anyone there. You see, my mom wanted to have me live in a new place in hopes that it would save me. My major was computer science in college, but it didn't suit me, so I barely graduated. I had a related job for a short while, but I quit. My brother suggested that I go to his teacher's college, and I entered college for a second time. I still thought that my stalker was somewhere around me, but I tried my best to ignore the feeling and focus on my life. I still had headaches, and my body always felt heavy, but now I was getting used to this delusional life. But in my 4th year, I had to prepare for the teacher certification exam, and my anxiety reached its peak. Since I was young, I had tried to find solutions for my problems in books. So this time again, I tried to find a way to survive in books. I feared that I would experience the same stress I had felt when I had transferred to a new school in 9th grade, and this time I felt hopeless against it. I grew desperate. In a best-selling Christian book I read, the word love drew my attention. I had not heard the word for a long time, and I thought of God. I couldn't continue living my life on my own, so I sought refuge in God. I asked my kindest school friend if I could go to her church, and I went to Hanmaum church with her. But my mind was so clouded that I couldn't understand the pastor's message. During every sermon, he would talk about the heart of Christianity, which is the resurrection. But for me, it was very difficult to understand. When I wondered about how a man can rise from death, it was like running into a wall of endless doubts. My heart was full of doubt. I read many books on Christian apologetics. I even went to used bookstores to find certain books that were out of print. Among them, I read a book written by Gary Habermas that demonstrated the resurrection as a historical fact on which both believers and non-believers agreed. Suddenly, I realized that I, strangely enough, doubted history. The resurrection was a historical event. It was recorded not only in the Bible, but also in Roman history and Jewish history. When I found out that the resurrection of Jesus is a historical fact, I was convinced of God's existence. Wow, the resurrection is real. God is real. Every word in the Bible is true. I had tried hard to understand the resurrection, but it wasn't something you could understand. It was really about verifying whether the resurrection had happened or not in history. And the resurrection had been prophesied in the Bible. Jesus died and rose according to the scriptures. God gave us many prophecies in the Old Testament so that you could recognize Jesus as God. And by dying and being raised as prophesied, it was proof that Jesus was God. I received Jesus as my Lord and my God. Amen. And I finally met my Creator, my owner. Amen. There was a time when I thought the Almighty God had abandoned me and resented Him. But He came to save me from death. He waited for someone like me with patience till the very end. I can't blame anyone for my painful experiences with delusions. It was all because I rejected God and was my own Lord. I thought I would be happy if I lived according to my plans and wishes, but the result was terrible. If Jesus was not my Lord, my soul could not help but grow sick and die. I was someone who had ignored my Lord, who had done and thought however I wanted to, and had fought against God. I, who turned from God, was like a monster. I will never commit the sin of being my own Lord again. Please forgive me for being my own Lord and thinking however I wanted. The Lord of my heart is only Jesus. I will only say amen to your word, the word of life. I was dying and God saved me. The fact that I'm alive and happy is a miracle. Me being me is the absolute grace of God. In the past, I wanted to live a life that everyone would envy, but I already had everything in Jesus. Also, I found out through the resurrection that this whole world belongs to the evil one and is under his control. And I also found out that he put thoughts in people's minds. I had been deceived for a long time. The devil had put thoughts in me when I was young, and I had become a slave to those thoughts. Even after this, I sometimes had battles with my thoughts. Once I went on a blind date, but I hesitated because I felt like I was betraying the person in my delusion. But when I realized that these thoughts were from the evil, I realized that I was deceived again. As I attended more worship services, the battle became easier and easier. And finally, this imaginary person was gone. Because I no longer had thoughts about that person, I felt so free. I'm so happy that I can live an ordinary life. My old wounds had been healed and forgotten. As I held on to the word of truth, my heart was cleared of all my complicated thoughts. The relationship problems I had with others were also solved naturally. I used to have trouble communicating with people. I could only talk to people who understood me. If they didn't, my mood swung widely based on their reactions. When I thought I was misunderstood, I got angry. I was only focused on receiving love. But the moment I learned that the reason Jesus was God, I realized that God Himself had died for me. Through this, I came to know true love, the love of God, who gives life even to the one who rejected Him and became His enemy. So now, I have become a person who can share love with anyone with the heart of God. Amen. I found true love through the gospel. Now I'm working as a teacher and giving the gospel to children who don't have hope because they don't know Jesus. I'm so thankful that God sent me to a school full of young souls. Because I went through such a hard time with my strange thoughts, I can easily recognize kids going through heartache. I can really understand the pain that they are going through, and I care deeply for them. Among them are kids with strange thoughts. Since I went through even worse things, I can understand and accept their troubles. I thank God for giving me a broad mind to understand these children with. They have many kinds of problems, but the only solution is Jesus. There was a child who suffered from child depression, and one day he ran out of the classroom. The child reminded me of my past endangered self. I brought delicious donuts for him every day. He ate them as I soothed his mind and shared about Jesus. He overcame depression through Jesus, and a semester later, he became the vice president of the student body with his leadership skills. I was very happy to see him bright and cheerful, and I thank God. Recently, we met again and ate dinner together. He's in high school this year. Now, people tell me that I have a good personality and a positive attitude, and I've become a person who brightens up the mood in a group of people. I adjust well to my surroundings, and I can get along well with people I've just met. I live the life of heaven on earth because Jesus is the Lord of my heart. I lived a painful life, dragged around by the thoughts that the devil gave me because I didn't know the gospel. But after receiving Jesus as my Lord, I'm so thankful that I have quit all the delusions from the devil and live a normal life. The key to victory in the spiritual fight is the fact that Jesus rose from the dead. God really exists. Thank you.